promised you a brief recap on municipal sewer and water. First, is sewer and water a genuine issue here in the village of Richfield? With all of the communication that's come out, some of you have to be scratching your heads and saying, is this a real problem or is this just hot air? We think it's a real concern, and we have reasons for believing that. We have always had reasons for believing that, and we're going to share some of that with you tonight. I'd like you to also keep in mind as we share this information that repeatedly, consistently, every board member has said no municipal sewer and water. If you attended any of the debates or forums, you'll see that that was stated repeatedly by the candidates. You'll also recall you've seen that stated in many of the documents that have been released by the village itself. The RCRG position on this is, first, we're convinced it's not a good idea. We think it's a bad idea for our community. Secondly, we believe that you don't want it anywhere at all. Third, we have never requested of our village that it not be implemented. While we don't think it should be, we've not made that request. We have only requested that the village allow you to vote and decide if and when the topic ever comes up. We think that you want to be able to vote and decide yourselves, that it shouldn't be left to a handful of people to decide, but rather it should be left to the community to decide. The Village of Richfield approved a public works ordinance in July of 2012. And you might want to ask Mr. Gil Frank, who's one of your candidates tonight, a little bit about that, because he actually initiated that request. He was the beginner of that, and it might be important to understand his perspective and what he thinks about it today. This is probably going to be a little bit difficult for you to read from back there, so I'm going to read a couple of pieces here for you. At the beginning, and without reading every word, but to convey the message, the village shall not enter into initial installation of sewer and water and any combination of the same which meets the following criteria. It's important to understand that this is a negative statement. This is what they will not do. And if you come down and look at 2.A.2, the public works project is located west of any property with frontage on State Highway 175, which is located in the corporate boundaries of the Village of Richfield as of the date of the time of this ordinance. Now, what does that mean? That means that this ordinance specifically disallows, without a referendum, the implementation of municipal sewer and water west of the Highway 175 corridor. What it also says, then, is that if that's what they can't do, what they can do is the rest, meaning they can implement municipal sewer and water at their discretion east of the 175 corridor. Why create this ordinance? The board did have the power to do this anywhere before this ordinance was created. This ordinance specifically empowers the board alone to make the decision about sewer and water along the 175 corridor. This ordinance is restrictive for west of the 175 corridor. Since they had the power in the first place, why do this at all? Now, I might suggest that you don't pack your suitcase unless you're planning to go somewhere. So why would you do this? Our opinion. The village knew that we were planning direct legislation for the purpose of empowering you to vote to decide on any municipal sewer and water. Direct legislation cannot be done if it violates or contradicts an existing ordinance. By adopting this ordinance, we were unable to do the direct legislation, forcing them to allow you to vote and decide. And at the end of all of this, you were stripped of your rights to vote and decide about municipal sewer and water along the 175 corridor. And all of these things are statements of facts. They can't be disputed. I'd like to bring you to an email that we sent to our board on September 16th, 2011. And I'm going to read this to you because I'd like you to understand it. And the only piece that's important here is what's highlighted in yellow. This was sent, as I said, to the president and the trustees. In order to work with you to set the record straight, we ask for your response for the following 2 questions regarding municipal sewer and water in the village of Richfield. 1, aside from federal or state mandated municipal sewer and water, for a specific problem that can only be resolved by municipal sewer and water, do you support a village-wide referendum for the introduction of any sewer and water within the village of Richfield? And that's a closed question, meaning yes or no. But it's only fair to ask, in addition to the yes or no, what's your rationale for that position? As it stated in the beginning, all we were asking to do was to get clarification on their views and opinions to set the record straight, because we see it in the process of coming, and they continually tell us it's not. Was not answered. We did get an answer from Trustee Shea at that time and from Trustee Voss at that time. First thing I want to ask you is, do you think that's a reasonable question to ask? Second thing is, do you think it deserved a response? We never received a reply from President Jeffords, Trustee Brandner, or Trustee Nye. What do you think about that? Why the ordinance? If they had the authority before the ordinance, then why would they do this at all? If you are told to protect you, ask the question, from what? Ask, if the project financially fails, then who gets the burden to pay for it? You know the answers to all of these questions already. It's you. Ask about the legal requirements for taxpayer-subsidized multifamily low-income housing. And if you say it doesn't apply, ask, what happened in New Berlin? Because that's exactly what happened. They put in municipal sewer and water. A developer submitted a request to put in low-income housing. The community denied it. The developer went to the federal government. The federal government filed a suit, and at the end of the day, New Berlin had no choice but to roll over and accept it. While we've never required or asked them to not implement it at all, only to give you the power to decide, we think it's not a good idea, and here's some of the reasons why. This is all data retrieved from the Wisconsin Taxpayer Alliance. It's all verifiable, it's all good. This was presented on the 13th. This first chart shows the mill rate, which is a dollar number on the left side, and the lines represent the mill rate for all of the communities that you see all the way on the right. And all of these communities have municipal sewer and water. The red line in the middle is the average mill rate for all of those communities. You can see that the average mill rate for these communities is about $6. If you contrast that to our neighboring communities that don't have municipal sewer and water, and the mill rate's on the left, the communities that we verified with are on the right, and all of their tax rates are the lines that are drawn on the chart. The blue line in the center is the average of all of those tax rates. The black line with the squares is a tax rate for the village of Richfield. Now, aside from the point that we're talking about municipal sewer and water, you might want to ask, why is it, as compared to all of our peers in our area, that the village of Richfield has the highest tax rate of them all? It seems like that's a question that might need to get answered. Now, if you take those two charts and you bring them together, once again, the blue line at the bottom is the average of all communities without municipal sewer and water, and the red line at the top is the mill rate for communities with sewer and water. And you can see that the average for the mill rate without is in the vicinity of about $1.30, and the average for communities with is about $6. So we would suggest, in terms of whether you want it or not, you ought to ask the question, which average do you want to be closer to?